All right. Okay, so this is a long time coming. Cara, we've been talking about this for a while. I want to welcome everybody to our Up to Us Sports podcast. Our goals don't end on the field. And this is our first of many episodes to come in conjunction with our She Changes the Game initiative. And so I'm so honored and so happy to have as my first guest for the podcast, Dr. Cara Cocchiarella. Dr. Cara is a professor in health and physical education at Clark College in Vancouver, Washington. She has a doctoral degree in educational leadership, a master's degree in health and human performance, and a bachelor's degree in health and human performance and Spanish. And she earned all of these degrees from the University of Montana, where she competed as a member of the women's basketball team. So in addition to being an athlete, Dr. Cara also has extensive experience and diverse experience as a coach. She's coached basketball, volleyball, track, cross country, football, and golf. And she started her career at the high school level, where her teams won numerous district and divisional titles and 6 state championships. 6, Cara, really? 6? 6 state championships, and has been awarded Montana's State Coach of the Year. And at the collegiate level, Dr. Cara served as an assistant women's basketball coach at Gonzaga University and spent 3 years as the head women's basketball coach at the University of Montana Western. In addition to all of that, Dr. Cara is also the founder of Win-Win Consulting, where she works with teams, coaches, and sports organizations to maximize their efficiency and effectiveness. And her passion for employing the positive influence of sports in the lives of all athletes drives her scholarly teaching, coaching, and consulting efforts. She's a member with the United States Center for Coaching Excellence, a member of the Be Like Coach project team, an inclusion champion with Move United, and a RISE champion of change. And she's completed the International Council for Coaching Excellence with the United States Center for Coaching Excellence Coach Developer Academy, and serves as a member of numerous local, state, and national education and coaching organizations. And if that is not enough, she is also the co-author of Winning Well, Maximizing Coach and Athlete Wellness. Welcome, Cara. Welcome.
Wow, thank you, Ahada. Thank you. That was it is a mouthful. Maybe it just tells my age. I don't know. But yeah, I really appreciate
but the face doesn't tell it, and that's what matters. That's what matters.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you very much. Thanks. I'm really honored to be here. I'm excited to be a part of this. Obviously, I have been very fortunate to be able to work with you, Ahada, on our project with Up to Us. And this is fun to be able to have this conversation. You and I have such great conversations anyway, but fun to have a conversation in this format and around your She Changes the Game initiative, which is something that I certainly support, and an area of the work that I do that's very much near and dear to my heart, and is a lot of who I am as a person and professional. So
absolutely. So let's go way back, Cara. Let's go way back. Not way back. Okay. I don't want to say way back because it makes you sound old, but let's go back when you started. You've been in sports for a long time, since you were a kid. And so when did you start playing sports, and what sport did you start with?
Yeah, thanks. So I started playing sports just as a little kid. I mean, I don't even know, in my family, we used to joke that my brother and I have this competition. Who was the person who's said basketball is their first word? Yeah. And I don't probably think either one of us did, but we were such active little kids, and we were constantly playing together. I played all the time, every sport I possibly could, with my brother all the time, with the neighbors, and I was fortunate in that my dad was a PE teacher growing up. So we just had an active lifestyle. And, I think a lot of kids probably looked forward to Christmas or some other holiday when we were growing up. My brother and I really looked forward to the end of the school year not necessarily because school was ending, but because my dad would check out a whole bag of like balls and sports equipment for the summer, and he'd bring it home and just like dump it out. And that was our version of what I think many people experience like at Christmas, this checked out equipment that he had. And so we were playing all the time. I think first sports, probably my first love was soccer. And interestingly, like as I grew up, I was priced out. My family and we were priced out of soccer. I couldn't afford club sports. And that was kind of the direction you had to go with soccer. So I stopped playing soccer and just continued playing the things that I could play for free, either at my school or in the backyard or in like community leagues, basically, like local leagues. So yes, soccer, basketball, little league.
It's funny, Cara, because it's not getting any better. You know what I mean? In terms of families and young people being priced out of sports. And that's just the reality. And some people may come across, a travel league that will scholarship them or whatever. But again, it's not the norm. And so I'm not really sure what we do at this point about it, because it still sets up the scenario that those that have get to participate in those elite level sports, and those that don't can't. And so, it's been happening for a long time, and I don't know that it's going to get better. But what strikes me is that you grew up at a time, and I'm older than you, so I go way back, but where you could play everything, right? You played everything. Like you said, your dad comes home with all this sports equipment, and you're just like, yeah, this is going to be an awesome summer. I get to play and do whatever I want, right? And now we kind of struggle sometimes to get kids to be active and want to go out, and it's almost like for a lot of kids, it's almost like it's a punishment when you say go outside and play. They're like, what? Yeah. Like, we literally were not coming inside to play. Like, that was punishment, having to come in. It was like, you better be in when the lights come on. Like, we were in North Philly, so when the street lights come on, you got to get in the house, right?
Yeah.
But until then, we were just out. And we were playing everything. We were, I was talking about, being summer times in North Philly with my brothers. I grew up with two older brothers, so I had to play what they were playing, and wanted to, whether it was football, whether it was baseball, whether it was kickball, whatever it was. Slap boxing. I remember slap boxing in the streets of North Philly. So yeah, that dates me. But yeah, I think there's a shift now that's happening with that. There's a shift.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. Like, sport culture in general, I think is super interesting because it is just as complex as the general culture, right? When we look at some of the things you're mentioning, like cost of organized sports, along with maybe, some changes in technology and just the way that people live their lives, and whether kids want to get outside and play, or they think that that's, their form of punishment, where for us, it was like, get out and go. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about how many games, like my brother and I and our neighborhood friends and whatever, that we just made up.
Yep.
We weren't actually playing by any, sure, there were rules. We made up rules.
Sure.
But it's interesting to think, I don't know how often kids are just making up a game these days.
Right.
And when I say things like these days, I really feel old.
I know. It's sad. It's sad. Tell me about, listen, so do you remember your coaches growing up? Who was your favorite?
Yeah, I definitely remember my coaches. I will say that for a vast majority of my childhood, my coaches were my friends' parents. Mm-hmm. My dad coached me once. We've got a great relationship, and we knew it was maybe going to be on thin ice if he was my coach and I was one of his players. But we made it through. We're doing great to this day.
Listen,
he was a
I promise you he struggled though. As somebody who coached my own daughter as well, that's not an easy thing to do. It really
no.
isn't. There's a fine line, right, between when am I your coach and when am I your parent, and when do I step back and allow somebody else to take the lead with you, right? As opposed to, wouldn't really do that a whole lot with a lot of kids, but when it's your own, yeah, that's a tough spot to be in. And as much as I love you, Karen, I know you were just this awesome person. I know your dad had some struggles with coaching.
Oh, I promise you he had some struggles. I did not make it easy on him. And he persevered, and I love him even more for it.
Right. Right.
Yeah. No, I work with a lot of coaches who are also parents, and have had coaches on my staff, my coaching staff, who have kids on the team, and yeah, I can certainly see the challenges.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was lucky. I had my dad coach me, but not very often. Usually, it was like other friends' parents growing up.
Yep.
And we just have
fathers or mothers or both.
A little of both. Okay. Certainly more often it was dads that were coaching. And to this day, we still kind of joke about some things. Some of them, I have a great family friend who coached me, who we always talk about play number one. Play number one in basketball was apparently the go-to, and we scored on it every time. And so he and I, we've got these jokes, and I have great relationships with those people. I would say, though, the coaches that made the biggest mark on me were those that I had in high school and my college coaches.
Okay.
Or my college coach. But yeah, I have, my college coach is a fantastic man, Robin Selvig. He has done incredible things with the basketball program at University of Montana. Sure. And had a really big impact on my life. At that point, I use the term play very lightly when I talk about my experiences in college. I practiced a lot. And I loved it. And at the same time, that coaching staff went out of their way to make let it be known that we all mattered, all of us, whether we played 2 seconds or didn't play at all, or the starters. So they had a really big impact on me. And that was the first time also that I was the kid at the end of the bench. So
sure.
They really, and we had fun. But I had some great coaches in high school. And one that really stands out to me is my high school volleyball coach. And she just did a lot to invest in me and cared about me as a person. And we developed a really great connection that has lasted to this day. And I was able to actually go back and coach with her, and actually was lucky to teach with her as well. But yeah, I definitely, like, my coaches made a big impact, and I'm using those two as an example. And it feels weird to even say this because there's so many others that had huge impacts on me, that when I say all my coaches, I'm including all of them. I was very lucky. Most of my coaches had an incredibly positive and profound impact on my life. I did have a couple not so great experiences as well, but
sure. It's interesting that you bring up, the fact that you didn't play a whole lot. I got to watch, I told you this, Cara, before, that I got to go to the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8 games to watch South Carolina. And phenomenal, Dawn Staley is one of those coaches that I've looked up to and watched throughout the years. I just think she's a tremendous coach in person. But when they won that title, one of the first things that she did was acknowledge those players who don't get to play, and made sure that everyone knew that everyone has a part in it, right? Whether it's helping the starters get prepared, everyone serves a purpose on that team. And I just felt, how special that is, and how much of a leader she is to acknowledge that for those who, you know how it is, Cara, you play in high school, everybody's a star in high school, right? And then you go and you play in college, and some get to play and some don't. But how do you create a culture within your team that says everybody, regardless of whether you start, you don't, you play, you don't, that you matter on this team and that you contribute to this team. And so that just stuck out to me, that you had coaches that did that for you, that made you feel that you are a valued part of the team, regardless of what your playing time looks like.
Yeah, that honestly, that quote and that moment in Don Staley's post-game interview that stands out more to me than probably anything else I watched in the game, just because it just like, it hit home for me. And I hope it hit home for other people as well, because that's a huge, big statement. And if you haven't been that person at the end of the bench, if you haven't been that role player, you don't know how meaningful that statement is. And I've been impressed with Don Staley in many different ways. And that was kind of the nail in the coffin, so to speak, of my fandom. I was like, oh man, what a huge, awesome statement to make. Immediately following a championship game where they're about to award an MVP and whatever else. And she went right to those players.
In that moment, you could have easily forgotten, right? You could have easily, a coach could easily get wrapped up in the emotion and everything that's going on. And so, yeah, that solidified it for me as well. I am not a 6-time state champion, but I have won one. And I remember preparing those girls for that state championship. And I remember having girls that didn't play and also bringing some of the girls from the JV team with me to practice and all of that and go on this ride with us. And I wanted to make sure that they knew that, listen, you probably are not going to get in the game. You probably are not going to see any playing time. But what you all are doing to contribute to this overall experience is so important. And I value your time and the fact that you even want to continue to do this, knowing that you may not get in the game. And I think that was one of those things that made them feel like, okay, I can do this. Like, this is all right. I can participate in this and I can feel valued in this, because it's so important. It's so important.
Yeah. Well, and too, when you're in that position, you mean it. You're not just saying those things to make those people feel better.
That's right.
It's true. And I think that when you recognize that, that's a key part of building a strong program, in my opinion. And it's something that I always made sure to do as well. And I think, especially as a little kid growing up, I dreamt of playing college basketball. It was my dream. And I grew up in a place where Lady Grizz basketball, the school that I ended up playing at, was like what every little girl dreamt of doing. And the fact that I got there and pretty quickly realized, like, oh, you think I'm as important as those other people who are scoring all these points? And then here you are, this big time coach, and you're going to talk about fun and how that's an important part of it. I mean, I just think I learned so many things from a fantastic coach at a really high level, and that are, those life lessons and those things that I think people often associate with like sports that are maybe not as competitive. Sure. And so when we hear it out of coaches like Robin Selvig or Don Staley, it just is so refreshing to me. And I get all cheesy and whatever about sports and the meaning and all the heart and love behind it, but it feels good. And it was really, really nice to hear that. I was excited to hear that, and it touched me. So
it did. Same here. Yeah. Same here. So what did you take with you? Because you've coached a lot of sports. Now, did you coach girls and boys?
I have, yes. Yeah. And I think, thinking about the numbers, I may have numbers wise coached about as many boys as girls. Okay. That's, because I was coaching track and cross country. Yep. on both sides, both teams. And then the football experience was primarily boys. Sure. And so, yeah, I have coached both. I did. Okay. When I chased my college coaching, dream, it was all in women's basketball. Okay. So at the collegiate level, I've I've worked primarily with women's teams, but
how
yeah.
important was that, do you think, right? For let's do both, right? How important was it for young girls to see you coaching? And how important was it for young boys to see you coaching?
You know, incredibly important. I think there was a time where I maybe would have said, oh, I don't know if it's that big of a deal. And I think over time, in retrospect, I've been able to look back and have really appreciated what maybe I was able to bring just in being there.
Sure.
And I think there are two things that stand out. I will forever remember this quote that one of the high school football players made at the end of the year banquet. Mm-hmm. And it was funny, the players had this tradition, or the team, I guess, had this tradition of talking about the coaches when the season ended. And and they kind of did a roast in a way of all the coaches. Yep. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking to myself, man, I've been here. This was my first year. I've been here 1 year, and it was quite the experience for me learning football. I loved football, but I never had the chance to play it. So it felt kind of strange. It was the first time I coached something I had never played.
Sure.
And, but I loved it, loved the players, had a great time, really liked being part of the staff. And I'm thinking, does one of these high school boys have the guts to stand up there and
right
and kind of roast me?
Right.
And I was like, there are definitely some things I could say.
Sure.
And, it was really great. This player who was assigned to me, stood up and actually said something that I will never forget. And it brings tears to my eyes, even just thinking about it. But he said his comment was something along the lines of that he had been in places. He was one of our Black athletes, and I live in Portland, Oregon, which is a notoriously very white city. Mm-hmm. And he said, I've been in places where I feel like I haven't fit in, and I can't imagine the courage it probably took for Cara to walk in here and to be a part of this. And it struck me.
Yeah.
And clearly is something that I will forever remember. Because I kind of just thought, ooh, and he is right. It did take courage. I didn't feel like I fit in. Sure. And what's interesting is when I look back on my coaching career, and I don't know if it's over yet, but I've taken a miniature pause, at least for now. Mm-hmm. I don't often feel like I fit in.
Sure.
And whether it's walking into the room as a coach or as an athletic director or as a consultant.
Sure.
A lot of the work that we do, I'm an outsider, at least in that sense of my identity. Sure. I think like many things in society, sports are also still very white, and I fit in that way. Sure. And I also pass as a cisgender woman. So, sure. There are different levels of this, but I certainly have felt like I didn't belong. And it was really interesting to recognize that it made a difference to the athlete. And I think that's probably been the case throughout my career, even if people haven't spoken about it so much. Sure. But I do think, especially coaching younger girls or women, I've coached a lot of players that have since then become coaches, which is so fun to see.
Yeah.
And I would imagine it made a difference. It certainly made a difference to me to have women coaching me when I was younger. And just to see oh, this is possible. I can do this. Absolutely. Even though most of these people are men, this lady's awesome. I want to go do that. Absolutely. So yeah, I think it has made a big impact for sure.
So he never roasted you? He only said good things?
He didn't even roast me. I mean, I'm sitting there. Yeah. I'm sitting there crying, expecting to be, and he was funny. He's a funny dude too. Yeah. And I was like, oh man, Kenya has me. He's going to have something good. And he did. He had something so good, but
Yeah.
it just, yeah, he didn't roast me.
But I think that it says this, Cara, especially, as a Black athlete, that it's very hard to take a position of not including someone in something when you've been excluded before. You know what I mean? And so I think that's what he was trying to convey was that you'll never get me to a point where I'm not going to include her because this took courage for her to do this, because he knows what that feels like to be excluded in certain situations. And so, what a beautiful thing, and how beautiful it is. Again, as a coach, those are the things that we like to see our athletes above all else, right? Above the great plays and the spectacular things that they do in their playing careers. We love to see them turn out to be great people, and people who recognize all of these different nuances that happen in society and in life and in each other's lives. And so, yeah, that inclusion piece is it's important. It's important to a lot of people, and for a lot of people who have been excluded.
Yeah, 100%. And I think too, I mean, while it was very touching, it was also very, it was enlightening and helped me to recognize my privilege too, because I, in many places I get to walk in, and what he was saying is, I recognize this because I do it every day in everything that I do. But yeah, it was just that recognition was huge. It really touched me. And I think too, and this is a place that you and I have talked about a few times.
Sure.
There's this sports bar that opened just recently in Portland, Oregon. It's called the Sports Bra. So just a slight change in the words, and a slight change in what they're doing, but that slight change is huge, and it's massive, and it's gone viral. I'm lucky to know the owner. She's a friend of mine, but she's opening this sports bar that's going to play women's sports on TV. And they're also supporting women food producers and beverage producers as well. So it's just this investment in doing things just slightly different. Excuse me. And it's crazy to think how that really is a very slight difference. And she and I have talked. I got to go into the space before they opened, and just chatted with her a little bit. And I went in and was instantly emotional.
Yeah.
And I was like, I didn't expect it. I didn't see it coming, but it just felt so good to be there and to be in this place where like women's sports are going to be on TV. And it's so crazy to me that seems crazy.
Yeah. Right.
Right. And we've talked about it. And I just told her, I said, Jenny, you're literally changing the world. Like this is so incredible. And her response was, yeah, it's kind of crazy what happens when you change the channel. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's true. All you're doing is changing the channel. Like, how simple of an act to just change the channel, and what an impact it can make.
Absolutely.
And so when I think about inclusion, I think we approach it as this big, huge beast, because it is in so many ways. And the actual changes or shifts we have to make might not be that dramatic.
Right.
But they're new, they're different. She's literally pushing a button on a remote.
That's it.
And it's like blowing people's minds.
Yeah.
It's been all over the news. It's going viral. And, I think it'll be, and it'll be a great thing for everybody. It'll be great for all genders and all ages.
Absolutely.
To be able to go into a place and see everybody who's competing in sports.
That's right. That's right.
So
well, listen, I'm glad that she's your best friend, because now you can get her on the podcast and we can have a conversation with her. Because I think, when we talk about women and girls in sports, it's not just playing, right? It's the marketing of women and girls. It's the support of women and girls. It's all these other different areas that happen in the sports industry that no one ever really pays a whole lot of attention to until something happens, right? Until something happens and you have to draw attention to it. But generally, it's just when you think of sports, you just think of the playing aspect and who those stars are, and possibly the coaches, right? Who those stars are. But there's so many other things that are happening behind the scenes, I think, that we have to start including in the conversations when we talk about women and girls in the sports industry.
Yeah, for sure. All sorts of aspects of the sports experience. And that's kind of goes to what we were talking about at the very beginning of this, sport culture itself.
Yep.
And really we've got a big battle ahead of us, so to speak, in order to make things more equitable and equitable for everyone.
That's right.
I think we need to acknowledge the rigid binary in sports that's been built and how that's been problematic for all athletes.
Sure.
And that we need to increase equity for all athletes. And girls and women are one group that for sure we recognize there are some issues. But it's the whole culture. And the culture of sport was built on this binary, men's and women's, and it was built for men by men.
Sure.
And then since then, we've kind of, we've added women here and there, and we've tried to kind of like add things to that side of the binary.
Sure.
And it just hasn't, we're just so far behind. And it's because so many things have been happening for so long in men's sports.
That's right.
That we've got all of these little and big and a variety of ways that we need to try to help women and girls to catch up.
Absolutely.
To have their chance and that's not even to mention the experience of trans athletes or non-binary athletes, but we have just so much that could be done because it's the whole culture.
Yes.
So exposure, investment, opportunities, access.
Yep.
So many different things and so many
many
different ways that we
things.
can make changes.
Well, I want to get to your book. I have it right here. Well, have it here. I want to get to the book because I think that this book speaks a lot to how you build those cultures, right? You go through every single dimension of wellness, right, that exists. And breaks it down in terms of how coaches can be aware, because that's a big part of this is our coaches being aware that there are so many different dimensions that exist for all of us, not just the young people that we're coaching, but for all of us, and to be aware of what those different nuances are within each of those dimensions. And so what I love about this book is that there's so many different stories, right, to connect, because I think, especially in the sports world, we love to hear those stories, right? We love to hear a good, perseverance or whatever, I was the odd man out. We love to hear those stories because they're so relatable. So first, what prompted this for you? What prompted this?
Yeah. So the process of starting writing the book was pretty interesting, just because my friend and co-author Camila Dana had wanted to write a book together for quite some time, and she is also a health educator and coach, and so we have a lot of similar experiences in the past, and we're different people, very good friends. And certainly have a lot of things in common as well. And, so we talked about like, well, what is it that we could give? What is it that sports culture needs or that coaches need that we could maybe help, share with them? Sure. And I think for us, and for me in particular, when I look at coaching And I work with so many awesome coaches. I love the consulting work I do, and I love working with coaches and trying to help them.
Mhm.
That's been a lot more fun for me than the actual coaching was, I've discovered
Sure.
in my like professional journey.
Yep.
But I see coaches spinning their wheels all the time, and spinning their wheels with like the best of intentions.
Mhm.
And we say things to coaches like, invest in your players.
Mhm.
Make sure you care about the whole person.
Mhm.
Don't like teach the sport and life lessons.
Mhm.
We say these things, but we don't give much guidance,
Sure.
and we don't really have any sort of framework for it, or any sort of structure to that. And I remember I always really gravitated toward those types of coaching philosophies, ones that seemed to really care about the athlete and allowed me to invest in them as people.
Mhm.
But still, I was kind of just making it up as I went.
Sure.
And so
Sure.
Camille and I had these conversations, and we kind of said, okay, well, how do we combine what it is we teach? Because what we're teaching is we're really trying to teach our students in the classroom, in our health classes, to thrive,
Mhm.
however that looks for them and whatever that means for them. How do we take that and make it something that's applicable to coaching and athletes and sports, so that we can help coaches and athletes to thrive? Because not only do they want to thrive as people, but they have that added level of wanting to thrive as performers as well. So they're aiming for excellence.
Sure.
And often what happens is they neglect the people part, and they start really striving for excellence in performance.
Sure.
And you have to have, they both have to be happening for someone. We gotta put effort into both of those things simultaneously. We can't just neglect who we are as a person and expect to be the best athlete or coach that we could be.
Absolutely.
And so it was just a lot of conversations around what it is we do in the classroom, and who we are as coaches, and how could we combine that, and what was kind of missing in the world of sports. And people talk about wellness too, and nobody really knows what wellness is.
Right. So
and
what is wellness? What is wellness? Because
Yeah.
I think people get it confused, right? Because there's a difference between, we talk about mental wellness, but then we also talk about mental health and mental health disorders and all of that. And people don't know what the difference is. So when we talk about overall wellness, what is it? What is it?
Yeah. So in in our book, we utilize a pretty common wellness framework. And you'll see some wellness frameworks that utilize like 6 dimensions, up to 8, maybe even 9. And we use an 8-dimension wellness model, which encompasses all these different dimensions of wellness: physical, social, emotional, intellectual, environmental, spiritual, occupational, and financial. So that wellness definition essentially is stating that in order to look at a whole person, look at someone holistically and authentically, we have to look at all of those different dimensions of their life. And if we want to promote I know I've used the word thriving more than once, but really it's about living our life in a way that we are most fulfilled and are able to thrive.
Sure.
And it allows us then to, incorporate our goals into whatever that means for us. But within each individual, all of those different aspects are going to impact our lives.
Sure.
They're going to impact the way that we operate, the way that we're able to perform, and the way that we feel about ourselves in our day to day. So wellness is this real big nebulous thing. It's really very individualized, but it's got all these different dimensions that are very much interrelated. And that if we want to improve our wellness, if we want to feel better ourselves and better about ourselves, we can look at these different dimensions and maybe make some little changes or some shifts. And often what's cool about wellness is that we can make a change in one area, and often that impacts others. So if we're doing things that are more positive or wellness enhancing, we have a lot of options. Wellness is it's endless. There's never a point where we're like, okay, I'm well. Boom, stop.
You're done. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And mental health is a big part of it. And we would put that into emotional wellness. We would say mental health is your emotional wellness. And it certainly plays a huge role. But whether we want to be the best mail carrier out there, or we want to be the best teacher or parent or athlete or coach, we need to invest into ourselves as humans and set ourselves up to be successful. And that means taking into consideration all of the different aspects of our lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, in the book, you touch on spiritual wellness. And, this one is interesting because for a lot of people, it automatically triggers the thought of this is about religion, right? So can you explain to us the difference between religion and spiritual wellness? Is it the same thing? Is it different? Are there aspects of it that are the same?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the short answer is spiritual wellness is kind of the overarching umbrella. Sure. And religion may or may not be a big part of that for someone.
Sure.
But ultimately, spiritual wellness is going to be about your core values and your identity. And probably more than anything encompasses your motivation or your why. So in sport, for some people, religion is a really big part of that. For others, it's not at all. And I think spiritual wellness, even for those people who a religion is a huge part of their spiritual wellness, there will still be additional aspects that go into it associated with sports.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's just your identity and who you are. And I say just your identity. Obviously, it's a huge part of what we do. So it's funny because, and how often have we ever talked about spiritual wellness in coaching or in a coaching book? It's just not something you hear about.
Right.
And
I think it's people get afraid, right? People are afraid to touch on it because people are afraid of conversations about religion, and you automatically think that that's the path that it's going to go down. And it's not necessarily, it's you can be a religious person, you can be a person who's not really religious, but still spiritual, still believe that there's something greater than you. There's still something that guides you and moves you, that motivation, that why to do the things that you do and do it really, really well. And so it's just so all encompassing. But I think we as coaches have to get away from being afraid to have conversations with our athletes about all of these dimensions of wellness, especially those who are coaching young people whose families may be having some financial struggles. You may be in a school district in which your academic wellness may not be the greatest. You may not have access to the best schools. And so, I just think that as people begin to follow this path of coaching, that again, you said it straight out the gate, that it's not just about the sport itself and the wins and the performance within the sport. It's bigger, it's greater than that. And there are all of these things that are happening in people's lives that do have an effect on their performance and the wins and all of that. And so if you can get to the heart of those things, you're just better for it. You're better for it as a person and as a coach.
Yeah, 100%. And we hear, that saying, that we don't coach a sport, we coach athletes or we coach people.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
somehow in the way that sport culture has progressed, we've gotten to a point where we've tried to eliminate the human element as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I say we, you know,
Sure.
obviously very generally. There are many coaches who would say, I've never done that, or
I don't do that.
You know, there are coaches who stand kind of in the face of that mainstream sport culture, but mainstream sport culture has tried to eliminate emotions.
Sure.
Right? There's no crying in baseball.
Sure.
Well, if there's not crying in baseball, then nobody gets to cry tears of joy when they win a championship either.
Right.
We can't just like pick and choose the pieces of the human experience that we bring to sport that we're going to allow in the door. So
Absolutely.
like you're saying, you know, when we think of the athletes that we work with and the families and circumstances of people's lives, there are so many really important things happening in people's lives, and they don't get to just leave that at the door.
Sure.
They're bringing, none of us get to do that. We don't get to do that. We're bringing our whole selves into our sport. Sure. And that's just the reality. And so trying to provide coaches with some tools, or like you said, really importantly, just a lot of awareness around who are the people that we're working with, and how can we look at those individuals and really get to know them and take into consideration all of these different aspects of their reality to be able to help them the best that we can. And no coach is going to be able to do all of this for one individual. Sure. We can't do it all for ourselves.
Absolutely.
But the goal would be to just increase that awareness and hopefully get people looking at things from a little bit more holistic and inclusive angle, and just being real about who it is that they're working with, and much more aware of some of the struggles, but strengths as well. So we can find both when we start looking at wellness for any one individual. So yeah.
I love it.
Well, thanks.
Listen, if you all want to know, how can we get your book? I got mine on Amazon, Winning Well. Where can we get our book?
Well, thanks. Yes, you can get, the book is available on Amazon. It's also available through the publisher, Rowman and Littlefield. Probably the easiest way for me to say, you know, over a podcast to find the book is I have it on my website.
Awesome.
And my website is winwin-consulting.com. So it's winwin-consulting.com, and there's a link there to purchase the book.
Awesome. Is that how we get in contact with you when we need some consulting as well?
Yes, that would be a great way. I love talking to people about any of this. I got into this work wholeheartedly just following my passion. Sure. And I absolutely love helping coaches and working with coaches and talking to coaches. Like, Ahada, this conversation is great. We could do this for hours, for days.
We have done it for hours, Cara. We have.
That is true. We've had
many conversations where we've been on Zoom and working together, and it has been literally hours. And so, yes, we could continue to do this.
I know. I love it. I love it so much. I really appreciate you and your questions and what you bring to the game and what you are providing and giving of yourself to your athletes and to sports. And I think, up to us is very lucky to have you, Dr. Ahada.
I'll let them know.
Yeah, no, it's great. I love talking about this stuff, and I will continue to do what I can to increase opportunities for everybody and the quality of those opportunities. And I feel very fortunate to be a part of it, and also am, very aware of all the inequities that are out there that we can do better. I know we can do significantly better in sports and in society as a whole. And I'm I'm willing to do whatever, that takes to be a part of that
Absolutely.
process. So yeah, it's fun. So thank you for having me. This
Thank
is
you.
great.
This was fun. I can't tell you how appreciative I am that you were willing to be my first guest for this podcast. And so I'm really excited. Like I said, I'm just over the moon excited that you were able to do this. And so pleased that I got to be in conversation with you yet again about, this area of life that we both love so much. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. And again, get the book, y'all. Winning Well. You've changed the game. Dr. Cara Cocchiarella. Did I say it right? Cocchiarella.
Cocchiarella. Yeah.
Cocchiarella.
Yeah, you nailed it.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Ahada, for allowing me to be part of it with you. And
absolutely.
I'm just so excited, and I'll be very excited to hear from your future guests. We'll coordinate, so hopefully we could get Jenny on here with you at some point.
Please do. I'd love to have her. And it gives me an excuse to have you back on as well. So
hey, let's do it.
I think that conversation with the three of us will be absolutely spectacular.
Awesome. Thank you, Ahada.
Thank you. Okay. Stop recording.